Hi everybody. So I am going through my collection, as you know, to revise it and refine it, and I will do so all of this year. And as I do so, I come across various decks which I thought might be well worth the time to share with you. And so this is Classico Tarocco de Marsiglia by Il Meneghello, and this is the second edition. The first edition being 1988. And so it says here 2,500 total, and this is number 513. I personally never really paid too much attention to that numbering here, because I do believe that the card here doesn't always correspond to the actual printing or the actual deck, and to me it doesn't really matter. And I did find in a couple of instances where the number actually doubled up, so that sometimes mistakes happen, and it isn't an information that I rely on, shall I say, to evaluate or to think about these things. And so this one here is, I think that's basically Italian for the Classic Tarot of the Marseille, or the Classic Tarot of Marseille, or Classic Tarot de Marseille, or something like that. And this is a little bit like the Jean Proché version of various historical decks. It is a re-rendering, a recreation, or a reimagination of a classic deck, a historical deck. Now, although the colors here seems really strong, it is apparently the kind of color palette that harkens back to late 19th century, so that's late 1800s. Schaffhouse decks, what they know as the Schaffhouse decks, and this proposition that the 1800s is actually a century filled with bold, strong colors is not new. There was a movie version of a book. I think it's called Metamorphoses. It's a very well-known novel. It's set in the 1800s, and in this movie, instead of somber colorings of clothing that we often associate with period pieces or with the ages gone by, characters wore large hooped dresses with bold, strong, bright colors like yellow and red and blue, not unlike what we see here. So apparently, the Schaffhouse deck from the 1800s or the late 1800s are very much like that. But having said that, this is definitely a re-rendering of what apparently is a Swiss deck by Jean Proché. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, whether it's Proche or Proche. It's Proche with a thing at the top. And so this is typified with the hangman wearing an outfit or dressed in 19th century, so dressed in a manner of people in the 1800s instead of older, and the fact that his head is shown in profile like that. And so it'll be interesting. I don't own the other deck. It'll be interesting to have a look at the Swiss deck by Jean Proché. And apparently it also has some features that you can find in a deck called Tarot Classic by US Games, which also derive its features from what people commonly refer to as the Proche-Gassmann-Schaffhouse lineage. So that's interesting. So it is kind of like an 1800s take on the Tarot de Marseille, or Tarocco di Marsiglia, as the Italian would say it, I suppose. In a way that we have a lot of modern takes, like Conrad Bandolph and the Jean-Claude Flornois retake or re-rendering or reimagining adapting the classic images and reimagining how would these images look like if they were created today. And so I am thinking that this is probably a deck which has been re-rendered based on their reimagining of people in the late 1800s. So the other interesting feature about this deck is, first of all, let me just say the cardstock is so glossy, and this is not for those of us who only just beginning to appreciate and to realize the existence of Il Meneghello and Osvaldo Menegazzi. We have learned to associate them with thick, textured, unlaminated, matte, luscious cardstock that look more like art papers rather than cardstock. This is not at all like that. If I'm not mistaken, that's the back. So the back is something that we've probably seen. If I'm not mistaken, there is another edition of this deck that isn't heavily glossy, heavily laminated in a glossy way like this. Please let me know in the comment down below. The other question I have also is there is scans of images with black borders and the coloring seems muted, more muted. Now the thing about coloring is that it often depends on our screen, but the black border is definitely there. And I've looked at someone else's database and their first edition doesn't seem to show black borders. So, and their database mentioned that the first edition has matte cardstock, but then in this box, and that the second edition is glossy like this, but it's packaged with the book cover with the ribbon, you know, that older style than 1996. A lot of their decks from 96, from the 90s, have that book, the book with the ribbon, what do you call it, the book cover style box with the ribbon, and then it's open at 3 of its sides like that, and it's tied here with a ribbon. So I am a little unclear about whether this particular edition here that I've obtained secondhand have been mixed up, but you can't, I mean, you look at the, so that's glossy too, right? So that's glossy. So you can say that this glossy deck here really belongs with this box. So I'm a bit relieved about that. The other thing to notice as well that you might find interesting is that the paper here, you can see that's mottled or marbled or whatever you call this, and you can see the texture of the paper through the printing. So as you can see there, the pattern or the texture of the paper that it's printed on actually you can see that through the color printed and drawing printed on the cards. The other thing interesting here is that two suits, the batons here and the swords, have Roman numeral. Let me focus this for you. I don't have autofocus, so I have to use my hand to focus each time. So that's the baton. The faces definitely look more modern. And of course I have my own preconceived notions of what modern is. And then you see the suit of cups here, and the suit of coins apparently have Arabic numerals. And for all of you who read the minors, I think the pattern of how the patterns of the minors here, how the minors are depicted, will be very important in terms of how you read. So like, you know, 10s are always 3, 3, 3, and then 1 like that. If the 10s are composed in a different way, then it will affect how you read. This is my experience. And so the cups and the coins have Roman numerals, but the swords and the batons, have Roman numeral, and the coins and the cups have Arabic numerals. So now we're back in Roman numerals here for the swords, there. The valet, the cavalier, the cavalier, the queen, and the king. And then in the coins we have, again, the Arabic numeral there, 4, 5. So that's, or maybe you want to have a look at the face cards for the coins. Here it is. Ballet, Cavalier, Cavalier, Queen, and King. Right. So yeah, so this is a rather interesting deck, and that I am still deciding whether to keep this or not. I'm going to have to play around with it a bit more in March so that I can decide whether to keep or to let go. I'm not the only one who are going through their collection at the moment and sharing the ones that are in purgatory here with everybody, because talking about it, playing with it, sharing with others, and then playing about it, playing with the cards yourself will really help in terms of deciding whether they work for you or not. And so that's quite interesting, that hangman there with the clothing and the profile face. And yeah, so that is so the information that I shared with you here, I've gathered from Tarotpedia, as well as Tarot Garden. Tarotpedia's webpage at the moment seems to be down, but when they're back up, you can search for it yourself and have a look. So this is perhaps like the 1800s, 19th century take on reimagining the Tarot de Marseille or Tarocco de Marsiglia in a way that 20th and 21st century cartiers or card makers and students of tarot reimagined Tarot de Marseille in a way that Joachim Bendorf have done, Wodarowskis have done, Jean-Claude Flournoy have done. That hermit is quite interesting too. He seems different, doesn't he? He seems younger and he's a bit more, he's not as gaunt. Yeah, okay, so I will leave you to that and I'll talk to you guys again later. Oh, the other thing is the titles are in French, even though the deck is called Tarocco di Marsiglia in Italian. The titles are French. Okay, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.